This is like a huge topic, and hopefully as the years go by, we'll continue to grow this and get some different ideas and some different topics. But are there any questions, generic questions from the audience? I have a couple for the panel members, if not. Yep, Mel.
Can you explain a little bit about fiduciaries versus everyone else that's out there? Is it a pecking order? Are you more protected by someone who says that's what they do?
So for those of you that might not have heard that, boy, that sounds loud. That question, it was what is the impact or what is the importance of a fiduciary in the relationship as in terms of your financial advisors? I'm glad you brought that question up because it was interesting. I've spoken all over the country for a meaningful period of time, and however many years ago when all of a sudden that word became the soup du jour, I remember it was actually a grand rounds, and somebody, probably like a 2 or a 3 goes, "Hey, are you a fiduciary?" Yeah, but I had to, why? Because I've been one for as long as I can remember. And he goes, well, according to Google, you need to be, if you're going to, financial advisor checklist is you need to be an independent, so meaning you're not beholden to an insurance or an investment company, you need to be a fiduciary. So I just wanted to see if you checked one of those boxes. And effectively what it means is you are held to the highest standard of client advocacy. And there are steps that you have to go through and things that you have to meet in order to achieve that.
Any other questions? I have a couple of questions. Steve and Pete, if you have not gone back and gotten an MBA, how do you develop an interest? How do you begin educating yourself in some of the basic principles of orthopedic trauma business and management?
Well, I don't have an MBA, so you can, Pete can talk about it if you choose to get one. I would say a lot of people who develop the time or take the time to get an MBA, many of them don't really use it. Some do. And so you have to decide if this is really your investment. For me, I had an opportunity to become a chief medical officer, which was a half-time job as it started. It turned out it wasn't a half-time job, but that's part of why I'm still a surgeon and not an administrator. But, I think you take the opportunities you can to learn how to interface with the system. I think the part of the problem is, like you heard from Tim and you heard from Pete, the CEOs and the top-line administrators want different things than the service line administrators do. And so it takes you a while to figure that out because nobody really tells you that up front. There's not a guidebook to say, oh, this is how it actually works. And so you have to sort of take the time to interface with people to figure that out, I would say.
I would say I don't think that an MBA is critical. I think Dr. Craddock's a perfect example of an inquisitive mind. And I think if you are inquisitive about the business of orthopedic trauma and how money flows through a hospital and a practice, if you actually sit down and think about it and ask the right questions, you are able to know where to go to get the information. And I think you just have to be dedicated, and I think you also need that inherent honesty, which can be an Achilles heel for all of us as physicians. But I think if we stick to our core set of morals and putting patient care first and collect data to support the provision of better patient care while potentially benefiting us financially, I think that's where to start. If you need the credibility to become a hospital administrator, for instance, and your hospital system says you have to have an MBA to do that, well, sure. Compared to medical school, an MBA is incredibly easy. I got my MBA at night during medical school. So, it worked out just fine and I spread it out. But, there's a lot of doctors in my practice, there's 4 now that have gone back to get executive MBAs and they have continued to run a full practice and just do it on the weekends and take a little bit extra vacation.
So we have a lot of travelers in our operating rooms. How do you incentivize the employees in the operating room to turn the rooms over, scrub the floors, and start on time?
To a large degree, that's a culture issue, right? Yeah. And the travelers are going to fit into the present culture that you have. And so you need to have a culture that is designed to start on time, do your turnovers quickly, and all of that. If that's not existing, the travelers are not going to change that. Right. And so that's a real big problem. And I think that to develop the culture, I found again and again as a leader in the perioperative space, I can make those changes and I can work hard at it and I can push for it, but it will be somewhat transitory. This has to come from the top. And by the top, I mean the CEO has to say, this is important, make it happen, no matter what. And you have to put the data behind it, and you have to put the full authority of all the chairs, as well as of the hospital administrators and the president and CEO of the hospital to make it work. And that sounds daunting, which is why it doesn't happen in a lot of hospitals.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that's a problem.
Yeah, Tim, the other point that's really important that was in there is that you really need to get anesthesia involved, because so many of the times you work with your nurses, but the reality is you're there 1 or 2 days a week, maybe 3 at most, right. But the anesthesia's there every day. And so if there's somebody from anesthesia there that's sabotaging what you want to do, it's just not going to happen. Right. You have to get them on board.
That was that slide I put, that anesthesia alignment. I think it's just so important. I mean, like Pete sometimes will have 6 or 8, 10, 12 cases. And, you know, maybe an ankle fracture, tibial nailing, maybe a pelvis. I mean, you know, there's a bunch of cases that need to be done. And unless he has somebody that can turn these rooms over and participate and go into the holding area and move the cases along, the whole day just turns bad. So I think that anesthesia alignment is really an important issue.
And that's why any successful orthopedic surgery center, and ours was ranked top 20 in the nation for being run well and efficiency and financial success, is to employ your own anesthesia. They work for you. If turnover times aren't 12 minutes, they're fired. Yeah. It's as simple as that. You need to be well aligned.
One other thing I did want to mention, in an academic center, often your surgeons are screaming for efficiency and turnovers, but they're the ones that actually get in the way.
Yeah, they're sitting
drinking
coffee. Yeah.
One of the things I found is when I was very successful at a couple different academic centers at actually getting the start times to actually occur at 7:30, people got mad at me because they scheduled all of their research meetings at 7:30. Right. And because they didn't want to start till 8. And same thing with turnovers, is they see patients in between. And once we lowered the turnover, they couldn't see patients in between. And where are they supposed to squeeze those patients? They had no other place to put them.
Great.
And so just remember that it's not always, you can be your own worst enemy sometimes.
Right. I promised Dr. Miklau I'd be on time, and we are 1 minute early. So I'll bring the session to an end, and thank you very much.